Hey, welcome back to Ironside Ranch. We got on-site Trav with us again today. We are going to be talking a little bit about your financials, right? So your personal, getting yourself well off to be self-sufficient. Neither one of us are financial advisors, so let me just get the disclaimer out there right now. We're not accountants. I have a criminal justice degree. There's no reason you should be listening to either one of us, but you know.
I have a finance degree, but I didn't take my Series 7 because my initial impression was this system is probably not going to be here long term. So
yeah. So the bottom line is we wanted to go through kind of why we feel the way we do about our portfolios. And I'm sure Travis and I disagree on a few things on there. So we thought we'd give you all some perspective on it. So we'll try to keep this about 15 minutes and I guess we'll dive right in. So the four pillars, right, we're looking at with finance is crypto, some type of cryptocurrency, your gold and silver, your precious metals, savings and fiat currency, and then I look at stocks. And when I say stocks, I'm talking about like ownership in a company. So we'll kind of lump those two together between a stock market, which is not technically an ownership, it's a derivative, or a ownership in like a local small business. We'll combine those together. Okay. So Travis, I know you do crypto and you follow a lot. And I don't want to get into what cryptos to buy or anything like that, but there's how are you? Why are you in crypto? What are you doing with it? And what do you see long term there?
Yeah, so I'm a hard money guy. I always have been. I subscribe heavily to the Austrian School of Economics, which is a handful of professors, mainly F.A. Hayek, Milton Friedman. You could consider to be in there. Rothbard, Mises, those would be kind of your core guys. But nonetheless, these are guys that are writing a lot of literature before the war and after the war. So there was a big conversation, 1930s in the Depression, big deal to be an economist at that point in time. And then all the way to the 1940s until Bretton Woods, and all of these different intellectuals had their ideas posted. The guys that I subscribe to happen to go through the German hyperinflation, and so they have a different aspect or viewpoint on economics. And so they're hard money guys. They don't necessarily believe in fiat currencies. They kind of believe in gold, silver. Crypto would be before their time period. But F.A. Hayek, for you super nerds, predicted the rise of crypto. He essentially said, until we figure out something that the government cannot control, this will be the business cycle. Basically. The video actually is amazing. It's like from the 70s. Somebody got a video in his office of him saying that. It's all over YouTube. So if you look at A. Hayek, yeah, it's a big deal. And like one of my roommates, like when I was younger, literally named his child Friedrich after Friedrich Hayek. So I'm a hard money guy. That's where I start. And that's where I base everything off of that.
Okay. So to me, I look at it, and the way that I view it is that the fiat currency is not real money. It's money because the United States government has set its money and we accept it as a medium of trade, but it's effectively worthless. And it is controlled by people that are playing a massive shell game that is very just corrupt on the baseline centralization of it. So that's why I have a problem with it, because it's not something that we can have any control of. It's all controlled by the powers that be, and it's just not a system that I believe in. And so the question came is, how do you store value then, and how do you exchange currency with this? And gold and silver are great, but Amazon's not going to be taking gold coins. It'd be nice if they would, but they're not. I'm not going to probably be able to mail Amazon a gold coin and get my item. Certainly not on 2-day shipping. But the crypto changes the game a little bit, because bigger companies like we saw Tesla starting to take cryptocurrencies. That changes the game, and so that the way I look at cryptocurrencies is basically they're just digital precious metals.
Yes. It's ultimately trading on the value of electricity, which is the bigger thing. So when you get into this and you get a hater and they're just like, well, that stuff's just made up, it's fake. Well, so is the U.S. dollar. The difference is guys like Mackay have backed it up because the U.S. military backs up the U.S. dollar. That's what it's supported by.
Well, and crypto, people that say that it's just a digital dollar, it's nothing, don't understand the blockchain technology. And it is very complicated to understand that. So don't get me wrong, you're not stupid for not understanding it, but you haven't I thought, because let me just tell you, I used to be very against crypto, actually.
Mhm.
Up until about a year ago, I was very against crypto. And then about a year ago, I started having my eyes open. I started seeing this is not exactly what I thought. I thought it was just somebody assigning a digital currency and saying it's now worth this much. And I was like, who's going to buy
Right.
that crap?
Yeah.
When you start understanding the blockchain technology and understanding what it is that you're actually purchasing with that, and you're purchasing basically a protocol to be able to transfer data and purchase things and have security on these transactions, and it's got more value on the technical side than just being a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when you really think about money and you look at the human history of money, I mean, we used to use, I mean, in World War II, we used cigarettes in prison camps as currency.
Yeah.
Seashells were currency.
Still use
Gold,
cigarettes in
silver.
prison camps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go
I
to
mean,
jail. You still use cigarettes.
yeah. And so like, that's the thing is like, so ultimately money comes down to a ledger or a unit of account. I mean,
Right.
money is basically a spreadsheet. That's what
Right.
it is. The great thing about gold and silver is like you got to get that thing out of the ground. You got to have physical possession of it. It's rare. It's fungible, which is a big thing that is, all parts are the same. All pennies equal a dollar. The problem with some cryptos is that not all of them are fully fungible, which we're maybe at a point in human history where that doesn't matter as much, but maybe it will matter a lot. So I approach everything as a hard money guy. I think that when you see all this printing going on, you have to go at some point in my lifetime, most likely, this is all the chickens are going to come home to roost.
Yep.
And if that occurs, I want to be on the right side of the trade. And so what I mean there is you can print trillions and trillions of fake US dollars. And then if one day all that just blows up and just ends up being worth zero, what is worth something? And do I have possession of those said items? And then you move into a new world as every currency reset occurs, where it's all about what assets can you buy and do you have the entrepreneurial skills to make those assets productive?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let me ask you this then, Trav, and then we can move on from crypto. What crypto do you currently manage and own right now? I mean, give me kind of a baseline, but I don't mean like every nuance, just kind of a baseline what you look at.
Of course. My largest holding at this point in time is Monero. It's private currency. It's a fast currency. It can be mined on a regular computer, which is, for those of you that are new to crypto, the mining process is unique because think of the entire banking system running on your laptop, and your laptop is helping do the transactions. And then, Mackay and I have a phone, and I send him something from my phone to his phone. Well, your laptops are backing that up. Like, oh, wait a second, hold on. Trav's got legit stuff? Okay, good. Does he have stuff in exchange? Okay, good. Everybody's confirming, and then X amount of computers have to agree. And so essentially what's happening is the miners are getting paid for their horsepower in their computer, and they're getting paid for their fuel in the form of electricity. And they are helping keep the system, the integrity of the system. So to me, as my biggest speculation position, I like Monero. I try to stack that every single month. Bitcoin is like the base of the portfolio because it's like the grandfather of all cryptocurrencies. It's like the one thing when people say blockchain, they think Bitcoin. You can do a lot of things with Bitcoin. You can loan against it. It just has like that social cred. Like it's just that social proof. But I'm looking at the second phase of where we're going in crypto, where a lot of guys that are like, oh, we're going to move to a crypto world. And I'm like, not if you've heard of the US government, that ain't happening. And so you got to think about tactical moves. Okay, so your opponent is the largest money printer in the world and has had a 50-year run of printing unlimited currency and getting away with it. And all of a sudden, people are getting away from that currency and conducting transactions in Bitcoin. I don't think that they're going to look at that favorably. And so I look at that going like, well, I better invest in some body armor or other things, other things that are going to help me shield my transactions when I do a deal with you for a cow or something like that. And the U.S. government says, sorry, son, that's called treason. We don't allow that in this country. Yeah. And so I'm playing that next move. If you're newer to the game, you just roll with Bitcoin. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good store of value. There will be pullbacks. There will be moments where it's down 50, but over long term, what we have learned from the last 13 years is that cryptocurrencies on average are increasing in value long term, but they're extremely volatile short term. And what we've learned in the last 13 years and really before that is fiat currencies are very consistent in the short term as far as value, but in the long term, they are forever and always losing value. And so there's this cross pattern where it depends on your timeline. And so if your timeline is far enough, crypto might be the best way to go.
Yep. And so to kind of give a broad overview of mine, we do, I do Litecoin, Bitcoin, and Ethereum as my three bases. And that's where I store the majority of 90% of my crypto. And then past that, I do a little bit of speculation in ones that I just look at the product and say, okay, I think this one is going to maybe go up because of XYZ reasons, and we just speculate in there. That's all money. That's my gambling money, basically, that I'm okay with losing. The money that I have in Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, that's more my kind of safe haven. Like this is where I want to store some value in something that's a little bit safer. And I may not be able to pull it out immediately because if Bitcoin's down, I'm not taking my money out.
Never sell at a loss.
Never sell low. But and again, that's why it's important to have multiple pillars of where your wealth is. So let's move on to precious metals. I'm a big precious metals guy. I've always believed in precious metals. The more I understand about it, the more I believe in precious metals. I view gold as a store of value that basically stays with inflation. It can have high rises and you can make some money on it. But as a general rule, that's how I view gold. Silver, to a certain extent, but silver is much more volatile, and I think silver right now is incredibly undervalued, and that's why I have a bunch of silver, because I think that we're going to see in the future silver going to $300 an ounce.
Yeah. Next to real estate, silver is my largest position.
Okay.
Yeah, and because it gives you a lot of cool things. So, man, silver to gold ratio, like just talk about that. So right now it's about 1 to 80. Which means 1 piece of gold, 1 ounce of gold will buy you 80 ounces of silver. Just so people know, Isaac Newton was famous for saying that the silver to gold ratio in the Earth's crust was about 1 to 12 to 1 to 15. He ended up being spot on that. And throughout U.S. history, we've fluctuated that ratio between 1 to 12 to 1 to 20. So for most of human history, the ratio of gold to silver has been 1 to 12 to 1 to 20, give or take, with the exception of the Egyptian Empire, which went 1 to 1. Which is interesting. You can get into some conspiracy there. But I'm not sure why they needed a very good conductor of electricity for all those tombs they built. I don't know. Like, it's kind of weird. But nonetheless, they were in that culture. They got to a point where they said, if you have an ounce of silver, that's as good as gold here, which is very interesting. For you guys listening, that would basically mean that you could buy something for $23 an ounce that might be worth $1,800 an ounce if you lived in that culture. So the idea there is that silver is undervalued from a historical perspective. From a perspective of what is actually the current mining ratio, it was 1 to 8 in 2020. It has dropped to 1 to 7. So that means for every ounce of gold that comes out of the ground currently, 7 ounces of silver are coming with it. In addition to that, most of the silver supply throughout history has been used up. There's a great book I just finished. It's called The History of Silver. Talked about how much silver the U.S. had during World War II and how much of it we used in the Hoover Dam and Niagara Falls to produce electricity during the war effort to build machines and factories. Essentially, all of the U.S. silver supply was melted and used in the production of creating electricity, which is pretty incredible. And at that point in time, since then, the silver supply has dropped very, very rapidly, meaning that at some point in time, we have Kodak film and we're doing Polaroids. We're taking pictures and we're like, oh, wow, this is great. And we're using silver-backed film, basically, like film that had silver in it. We threw all that in the landfills. And because the price of silver was so cheap, so far we haven't cracked open the landfills to go get that silver. And so we put it in our phones, we put it in our modems, put it in our computers, we put it in everything electronic, and we've been tossing those things out because silver is only $23, so nobody cares, and you only have like less than 1/10 of an ounce in a phone like this, so it doesn't matter. So ultimately, you end up in this case with silver where you've got a mining ratio of 1 to 7, you have an Isaac Newton ratio of 1 to 12, 1 to 15. I think it was like 15.5 or 12.5. It's one of those two. And you end up in a U.S. historical standard of 1 to 12 to 1 to 20, depending on the year or the decade or the politicians. And now we can buy it for 1 to 80. So it's
Right.
super,
And one
super.
of the things that I look at with silver so specifically is that silver is both kind of considered a traditional precious metal that's also an industrial metal, whereas, you look at something like platinum and palladium really have value because of their industrial use.
Yeah,
And
sure.
silver has both kind of this artificial value because people think it's pretty, as well as having this industrial value. And so that's one of the reasons that I look at it. And silver in industry is not replaceable. There's no other metal that can do basically what silver does. Gold, to a certain extent, can conduct in a similar way, but gold's more expensive, so why would you use gold?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the only thing that can touch it is something that's far, 20 times more expensive, 30 times, whatever the ratio is right now. And so that's why I think that silver is incredibly undervalued. Silver is absolutely necessary for all the electronics that we have, for solar panels, which everybody wants to push solar panels now. It's in your cell phones, it's in the electric vehicles that we're making. So, I mean, Elon Musk is constantly searching for new sources of silver. And that's going to, I think, eventually going to have to do something, drive the price up, because the demand is already there and the supply
Yep.
is limited. It's a precious metal. There's only so much of it that's accessible to us. So the demand is there, the supply is limited. The only thing that can happen is the price can go up.
I mean, with a long enough period of time, yes, because you could have a market crash like we did in 2020, and silver went down to $17, actually 13 for a moment.
Yeah,
My
if it
buddy
drops
back
down
in
again,
truck.
I'm buying a bunch more.
Yeah, exactly. So it's possible. But long term, ultimately, silver is kind of the Achilles heel of the commercial banking sector. It's super needed for an industry. And it has been used as the biggest form of money in most of human history has been silver and copper.
Yeah.
That's what you buy your small items in. That's what you buy your trucks and your tractors in. You buy your real estate in gold.
Mm-hmm.
Gold is like that one store hold where JP Morgan said, gold is money, everything else is credit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, one thing interesting for you guys that maybe don't have or haven't bought their silver, and they're like, okay, where do I go get silver at?
I go to
You can
Miles
go down.
Franklin.
Miles Franklin's great. Local coin shops as well. When you get into a piece of silver, and this is a U.S. piece of silver here, this is minted in 1991. You'll notice on this thing it says one fine ounce of silver, $1. And so a dollar, the original dollar, meant 1 ounce of silver.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a dollar is. Interestingly enough, I had to buy these things for like $31 now.
Yeah. Well, and if you're looking for silver, Miles Franklin and SD Bullion are both great companies to go to. I don't get paid anything for either one of them. I'd like to, but they both do a great job of taking care of you. Miles Franklin can usually get you a little bit better transaction, and they ship with UPS instead of FedEx. And I hate dealing with FedEx because FedEx sucks. So that's why I don't do SD Bullion, simply because they ship with FedEx. But local coin dealers, you can get a better deal sometimes if you go to a local coin dealer, but you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to know how to, for one, identify it and make sure that it's not that what you're dealing with is something that's legitimate, and that you go down to a pawn shop oftentimes. Well, they'll have a Canadian maple leaf that's $10 over spot. It's like, no, I mean,
No.
you're way overpaying for it, and so you got to know what you're looking for, know what the spot price is, and know what a reasonable premium is over spot. But you can find some really good deals in the pawn shops and stuff like in the coin dealers.
And at this point in time, I mean, we're just mentioning it because it seems to be very undervalued when we're in an inflationary situation. It's also there is no third party risk to having a piece of silver. If I pay you this piece of silver, the transaction is done. There's no clearinghouse, there's no bank, there's no check that has to process or clear. None of that. No, there's no taxes, right? There's none of that. Interestingly enough, Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver.
Yeah.
Judas betrayed him for basically less than 30 ounces, actually, because 30 pieces actually ended up being at half an ounce. So basically, Jesus was sold for a tube of silver.
Yeah, I remember the
It
very
is.
first time we bought silver, my wife and I had like 3 silver coins that I bought when I was like 12 years old that I still had in my safe. And so we ended up buying, and we said, okay, we'll buy this amount of silver. This is the cash that we had to put on it. And when we got our silver, it was 27 ounces of silver. So we had 30 ounces of silver. We're like, okay, we got to buy 5 more. We can't have the Judas number of silver in our house. So we bought 5 more
Yeah.
the next day. Like
Yeah.
that. That's just
No,
bad. So,
it's
okay.
just,
So precious metals, I mean, you're with me. I mean, a good portion of your standing should be in there. Like I said, I like to hold my savings account in gold. To me, that's a better savings account than cash. Um, but I guess if you don't have anything else on that, we'll move on to kind of cash holdings.
for the period of time that we live in. So I think it's important because this video 20 years from now will look like a joke. People will be like, why would I do that? There's been moments where the Dow has equaled one piece of gold twice, 1933 and 1981, about every 50 years. I recommend grabbing silver because relative to gold, it's very cheap. They're mining 1 to 7 of this thing, and the Earth's crust composes 1 to 12, and it's selling for 1 to 80. So it's like you get yourself like 80 of them. I would recommend when those ratios come back into line, more consistent with the Earth's crust or the mining ratio of like what actually exists before we crack into these landfills, maybe you consider moving over to that to the gold as a long-term storehold of wealth, because it is payment in and of itself, and it is money. Everything else is credit. And if we happen to live in a world of cycles, it's possible that you could trade 1 ounce of gold for an ounce of, or for the Dow, for a share of the Dow Jones, which I think right now is like 34,000 or something like that, 35,000. And so it's happened twice in history, maybe third time's a charm. But what I'm basically saying is that the Dow right now is selling at 34,000. It's kind of scary. And gold is selling at 1,800. And I expect them both to balance at some point in the next 10 years.
Yeah,
I
wholeheartedly agree, and I think that gold. I think gold is kind of suppressed right now, and so I think that what'll end up happening is as gold picks up some steam and we start seeing that it goes to 3,000 an ounce. I think there's a bigger jump between 2,000 an ounce and 3,000 an ounce than there is between 3,000 and 10,000.
For sure.
To be honest with you, I think that
I guess my long-term point there, to wrap this segment, is like, it's important to know when to sell or spend, because a lot of people are like, they bought silver or gold, never spent it or sold it because the debt bubbles never popped.
Yeah.
But if you live in a moment where it does pop, that's important. I think what you do, ranching and everything else, is important because it helps you stay in the trade. I mean, I save this because it's a real store of value. But I hope that I can stay in this in an inflationary environment where I'm not so drawn out on my bills where I have to sell this to survive. And so I think that becoming self-sufficient is key to holding on to your position. But I do think that at one point when you see the Dow equal 1 ounce of gold or get darn near close to it, you might want to look at it and go, hey, long-term, new cycle's starting, new world is starting. Things won't be crazy forever. We'll go back to the 1990s many years from now, but like we'll go back to that type of life again. But at that point, you want to trade something that just sits in your safe for a productive asset. But I think that mentality wise, you always want to have your base, your core foundation of your financial life in a precious metal.
It's the basic principle of rebalancing your finances. As if I have 4 stocks and 1 stock goes up and 2 stocks go down, and I believe in those stocks, I sell that one that's high and bring up the 2 that are low, so where everything's the same value, because that forces me to buy low and sell high, which is the key to the stock market, right? And so it forces me to do that. And so it's the same principle with all your assets across the board. One of our largest assets is honestly our land and our cattle, and being able to have the ability to produce food. And so I consider my cattle and my hay a greater store of value than my gold or my silver.
Of course.
Because we're seeing the beef prices go up, so my cattle are getting more and more valuable.
And when you guys go down the rabbit hole, like this thing literally says $1 US. If I go to the Cayman Islands, you know what I'm going to pay taxes on if I move money out of this country? $1.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's true.
Right? So if you want to move, and this is how the big boys do it. Same thing with gold. If you guys have an ounce of US gold, it will say $50 on there. It's selling for $1,800, but it says $50 at the bottom of it. It used to be $20. A $20 bill used to be an ounce of gold. That's how rich America was. Just to give you a perspective on that, at that point in time in 1903, which it lasted a long time past that, but in 1903, a man named Henry Ford was paying his workers $5 a day for labor to put tires on Model Ts, which means every Thursday you could have bought an ounce of gold, which means if you worked for Henry Ford, you made 100 grand a year.
Yep.
That's how wealthy America was.
Yep. Yep. It's unreal. Well, okay, so let's move on to fiat currency, right? So the system that we all hate, we have to have money in it. There's no way around it right now. It'd be nice if there was, but I don't see that in our future. So, I mean, what are your rules of thumb? What are your tricks of the trade to, are you keeping some in cash in your house? And I know you do that because you talked about that with I think one of the videos I watched of you today, you were talking about how you've got to keep cash around for the hurricanes coming through, because when the hurricane comes through, you're going to lose you might lose power for 3 weeks. You got to have cash to be able to buy groceries. Yeah. And I just think having cash on hand is a good idea for similar reasons. But so what do you look at? How much of your net worth are you trying to keep in liquid cash that's ready to that dry powder?
All right. So right now, I think a good rule of thumb would be 30% in cash, because I genuinely anticipate some craziness happening, and cash is a good position to be in. I'm not at that 30% yet. We're building a property right now, and we're doing a couple things like that. So it's like I'm trying to get there.
I know I'm in the same, but we're building a farm and a shooting range, and
it's like, man, it doesn't stick around.
You have your ideals, and then you have what actually happens in real life.
Exactly. Yeah, it comes and goes. So, I mean, if you could get to a 30% cash position, that's a nice position to be sitting in. I don't think I'd want to be higher than that, because I feel like the purchasing power would be dissipating too much. Physically, I like keeping cash. It depends on the amount of cash you have. I mean, if you got under 10 grand, it's easy to have possession of it. You need to have some digital cash so that you can go online and pay a bill.
Right.
Like that. But one thing you had mentioned about equities and things like that is one thing that I'm genuinely worried about moving forward here is the possibility of getting canceled, not just on YouTube, on something I put a lot of effort into, not just there, but like the idea of like, oh, I'm sorry, sir, you haven't taken the experimental medication. You're canceled from the financial system this afternoon.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think that that's going to happen, which is why I stack silver, because when that happens, I don't think they understand how hard I'm going to go on building a parallel economy. And they're going to literally have to black bag me when this happens, because I'm going to go unbelievably hard to get this stuff into circulation. This is why I stack chests of this stuff, because I'm going to build a parallel economy that they can't tax and they can't steal from. And I think genuinely that's going to work. But one thing that concerns me about having money in the bank is that it can, I know you and your wife, I was watching one of your videos, you guys had your cash locked up for like 10 days. You had no access to it.
It was really ridiculous. Actually, it was the bank's error. They cashed somebody else's check out of our account, 100% bank error. And they told us when I called them that we had to submit it as fraud. And I said, I'm not submitting it. This is fraud. This is your incompetence. This isn't fraud. And I love hearing that. So I didn't get a great response from them, no. And anyway, so they locked up our accounts for 10 days. One day I finally, because we thought any day that they'd release our money the next day or whatever. And I finally, a couple days before Christmas, I called them. I spent 3 hours on the phone with them and on hold. I spent 3 hours on the phone. I just put my earbud in and went to work, and I spent 3 hours on hold with them trying to get and they finally released all of our funds. And at that point in time, my wife and I, we took our cash reserves down to about 5% of our total amount. And we said, okay, because I can put money in cryptocurrency and in something that's safe, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, right? And I can put money in those three things, and I can pretty much get my money out in 24 hours notice whenever I need it. So any type of emergency, I can hold it there and I can get it out. Now gold, I can hold it in gold, but gold takes a little bit longer for me to get my cash out, because I got to ship it off to Miles Franklin and get the money back, and it can take a little bit more time.
Yep.
But so that's why.
Long term, I see this being represented on the blockchain, on another blockchain. Maybe I send this to Rick Rule or Miles Franklin, and they say, "Oh, Trav's got X amount in an account, and I can send it to you." So I do think long term we can send this, and then if you want demand of it, maybe they charge you shipping, and you can actually take possession of it.
Yeah, I've actually wondered why Miles Franklin hasn't done that yet and created like the Miles Franklin vault coin. You know what I mean?
It's the regulation, and I think the days are too early. But yeah, I mean, so basically what we're getting at is, do I trust third parties? Not right now. No, I don't trust anybody right now. to be
Yeah.
honest. I don't trust absolutely anybody. And so, thus self-reliance and everything else.
Well, that's what this entire
And
channel is about. This entire channel is about self-sufficiency and
yeah,
being able to take care of yourself. You're always going to have a village and people to lean on and people to talk to and other intelligence, but it's about finding like-minded people that want to be self-sufficient, employed, gainfully employed, working towards bettering themselves and their life and their position in life.
yeah, I agree. I agree with that 100%. And also your move on crypto, I just got to tell people, like, because I know it said Monero earlier, I'm a fan of Bitcoin. Litecoin, I think, is that next move where you're like, I want to own a full coin. What
Yeah.
do I buy? And Litecoin is the one you come to, And so for those that will go down this rabbit hole, Litecoin was like the second cryptocurrency basically to come out, and it's just 4 times as abundant as Bitcoin. There's 21 million Bitcoins. There's 84 million Litecoins. They don't trade like that, kind of like silver to gold. They trade at like 1 to 300. So, I agree with you on the Litecoin perspective there, because everyone's like, oh, this isn't going anywhere, and I'm just like, yo, it's so cheap. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Well,
like when I'm buying Litecoin, I'm like, it's so cheap.
at the end of the day, we knew, crypto will keep up with inflation. By the nature of it, it has to, right? Because it's a deflationary asset, essentially. But as long as the crypto doesn't go to zero, it will keep up with inflation. So to us, it's a great way to store value and to store money that's not losing money in my savings account. And that's not locked up by the banks, and they can just hold my money whenever they feel like it. That I had a problem with. And as soon as Coinbase launches their credit card, then the game's open because I can just swipe my card and use my coin.
What's amazing is, like, I know now that you take Litecoin, which is great, because if I need beef, I can get it. I've got it. I can send it to you. You know what I mean? And so
absolutely, all day long, we'll take cryptocurrencies all day long. I always tell people, I'll take cryptocurrency, I'll take gold and silver, and I will take trades for things, trades for hard assets, all day long.
GSB, gold, silver, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But see, that's the time that we live in right now, where like the best investment may be the currencies themselves and being apart from them as they inflate and print and print and print. Does the price of Amazon or Facebook go up with the printing? It seems to have so far, but at some point people might be like, wait, what's the value of Amazon or Facebook or Google or any of these things? And how many Bitcoins are there and how many ounces of silver are there is pretty asymmetrical. It's just kind of like, it's how many there are. Also, there's some privacy, especially in the physical silver, where you can exchange it. So as far as a store of value, I mean, for this moment in time, this decade, that's kind of what I'm buying. I'm just storing my wealth and waiting for a moment to be able to buy things at cheap prices. And I am banking on the fact that silver is going to hold its value better than my dollars.
We're doing, and I'm willing to trade out Bitcoin, silver, and gold for land. That's to me, land is the ultimate asset, and so that I will trade out anything that I have to buy more land. And so if I'm waiting for the day where I can take 100 ounces of silver down there and say, hey, I heard you had 50 acres for sale. I want it. And here's my silver.
So this one is Queen Elizabeth, right? So I stack some Canadian, because I know that I can go to the Bank of Canada many years from now and buy property, and I intend on doing that.
Yeah.
So that's one of my moves. I also know I can cross the border and not pay taxes when I'm bringing Canadian silver to Canada. Right now, I wouldn't be allowed to go to Canada because of like medical tyranny, but like eventually I'm banking on them destroying their economy enough. And the reason I've always believed that countries like the US print their own silver is because at some point in time, it does come home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the importance of this stuff. And so I collect some of the Canadian because I like the people there. I like the place up there. It's one of the only places in the world I know they don't use Roundup. And that's important. It's a big
I agree. Well, there's a lot of Europe that started banning a lot of that stuff too, and the GMOs and stuff. So there's a number of countries that my wife and I have looked at that are like, these are places we would consider going.
Yeah.
But
just because of that reason alone. When you think about grandkids and stuff like that moving forward, it's like, man, I want to be on property where I know nothing poisonous was thrown down here 20 years ago.
Yeah, the nice thing is that the Roundup and stuff like that, it actually degrades fairly quickly. So if you do kind of organic farming practices, that most of what's in your soil goes away. It's got a really short half-life. But let's jump to this last section. This went on way longer than we had intended it to because we're going. But so let's wrap this up with kind of the final point here is I like businesses. I like things that make me money. Stocks are a great option, but they're tied up in the fiat currency. So I tend to prefer, to me, a better option than buying a stock in Amazon would be to take that same money and buy a share of a local business that wants to take on investors or something along those lines. I like that avenue. As long as it's a well-run business and you can get into the financials of it, I'll be a silent partner all day long the same way I would on a stock. But to me, that's a true share of a business. So I think, in my eyes, businesses are one of the ultimate stores of value, and because if they're well run, they will keep up with inflation and perform well. You look like you want to push back on that idea.
I've had some businesses fail.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think anybody that's been in business for any period of time will have had businesses fail. And like I said, we can talk about this, the 70% thing where, 70% of businesses fail. That's a crock. That's a junk, bunch of crap.
Yeah.
But,
value store is a stretch for me on a business. Well run, interesting perspective. Real estate, I agree with that 100%. The problem with a small business that I own as a silent partner is liquidity. I don't have much liquidity. There was a time in my life where I was introduced to Bitcoin at $3 a share or $3 a coin. And I was trying to wrap my head around this idea of like, okay, there's 21 million coins. They're selling for $3. How do I get them? There's no exchange. No exchange at this time. And so my buddies are mining them in house on the laptops. And so you give them cash and it was weird. It was really, really early days. I owned a landscape company at the time. I owned a third of a landscape company at the time that was operating in Florida, and I was in Arlington, Virginia. I didn't have any liquidity in that business. Had I had more liquidity in that business, I might have said, take my $30,000 of value in this business and get me 1,000, get me 10,000 of these things that you call Bitcoins.
Well, I think that's where you come into having these pillars, where having some cash on hand or having something that is liquid, because you're right, the shares in that business are not liquid, but the dividends that shares pay me can be very liquid, and those can allow me to purchase more Bitcoin and more assets. And so that's the way I look at it. The other thing is that I want to look at well-run businesses that I trust, that it's somebody that I have a personal relationship with the owner. I trust the way that they're going to manage the company, or the manager, the managing partner, and the business. I like a business that has a lot of hard assets. I personally own, I own a home inspection business in Birmingham, and that is actually not a business that I would want to buy in as a silent partner, because there's no hard assets with it, right? There's very few. We have our tools and our vehicles, but we don't even own a building because everybody works remotely. There's no sense in us paying for a building. So that is not a business that I would want to buy in. But buying into something that's, I don't know, something like a nightclub, which are just basically cash machines, something like even a large ranch, where if I could buy in as a percentage of a large ranch, because there's a lot of capital in the land there and in the cows, things that are very intense on the asset side, that's the type of business that I like. So it shouldn't just be any business.
I agree with that. I agree 100% with that. I also like the idea, if you want liquidity or you want to be in the markets per se, there are a lot of interesting speculations. Like, where do we think oil is going right now? Exxon is paying a 6% dividend. So they'll pay you 6% to own the thing. Oil seems pretty cheap in my mind, from where I think it's going.
I would like to own an oil well at some point in time.
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of the smaller companies for sure. If you want liquidity or to be able to loan against it at some point, larger companies, my concern with that is on the smaller end, not having the liquidity to get in and out of it. But if I have the cash flows, if I'm in it for the cash flows, like a rental property, I'm totally cool with it.
Yep.
On the larger side, and this is kind of tinfoil hat, I wonder when the time comes that maybe we don't have access to our Robinhood accounts. Now, I just wonder, because it seems very Great Reset to me, where it's just like, hey, so you got 4 million in your Robinhood account. Psych, not anymore. And it just seems to me like one of those things. So when you say small businesses with capital, yeah, I get that 100%.
Especially something like you do. I mean, you do heavy equipment stuff and like excavation, right? Isn't that what your business is? And something like that, I would have no problem buying in on a share of a business that's like that, because you're so heavy in assets. And if you've got good cash flow coming in, you're not going anywhere. You've got the assets. You're personally invested in the business, so you're not going to tuck tail and run. And as long as I can look at the balance sheet and say, okay, this is a well-run business. It may have some debt borrowed on the machine, but we're not at 100% debt ratio. We're at, they may have 70% going or coming in to 30% going out. That, something along those lines is a healthy debt ratio. That's a whole different animal. And so those are the type of business I'm talking about. Businesses that are asset heavy. I think those are great investment opportunities.
And then moving forward, it's still a little far out, but like when you're able to represent a business like yours with an NFT, now you solve the liquidity problem and you don't need the third party.
Man, if I can figure out how to do all that, that's all so complicated. I don't have any idea how it all works. If I can figure out how to do it.
All I'm saying is, like, for the young guy that's watching this right now, who's like, you know what? Yeah, here's where this is going, guys, is I can mint a Trav coin and I can say, I'm going down to Mexico. I'm buying a 5,000 acre ranch. It's $1 million and I'm selling 1,000 coins, which means if you want to share this thing, it's 10 grand. And I'm going to go down there and start ranching it. And the thing starts spitting off 10% a year. So I start making, 1,000 per coin on this entire thing. What I'm saying is that I'm representing, the asset on a blockchain without having shares of the company and putting them on Robinhood. Mm-hmm. And that is a major game changer.
It is. Yeah, the NFT thing is a complicated thing, so it takes a lot more depth than we can go into tonight.
It's worth mentioning just for the video, just for the guy that's going to see this 60 months from now and comment. Like when he comments in 2027, and he's like, oh my gosh, dude. Yeah, and he links the story. Oh my gosh, did you guys see this Mexico ranch sold on NFTs? All that 22, man. But yeah, that's what's going to happen is like, that's the solution to where we're at now. We're like, a lot of the wealth is controlled by a small group of elites. And then everybody else is kind of getting screwed. And then the middle class is like trying to pick where they're going. Are you going to be that guy that owns a bunch of rental properties and is with the banks? Or are you just going to get pinched by inflation and just slip? Mm-hmm. But like we're living in a time during this fourth turning moment where it's like one team or the other team. But the solution when we get on the backside of this, like when I start spending this into circulation, because I know that I'm going to buy assets that will create me more of them, is we're going to go back to more of like a democracy of being able to move value around, I guess, if that's the proper way of saying it, where people will be able to buy into assets. And I think NFTs will be the tool that they'll use.
Yep. I think there's definitely a potential for the NFTs. I don't know enough about them to put any money into it or buy it or anything like that. I'm certainly not buying the Paris Hilton NFT or any of that crap out there.
It's just stocks on the blockchain. I tell the Ninja all the time, I'm like, dude, I'd like to buy the Ninja coin. I'd like to buy it before you announce it, personally. Because if you keep building this brand, like you're building this brand, like I found the Ninja when he had 500 subs.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. I found him when it was it wasn't 500, but it was very, very low. I think he was at about 15,000 when I got him.
So you imagine a guy like that, let's say that he wasn't as well, well situated to be able to to be able to invest in the craft. And I was able to approach him and be like, hey, I think you're valued at 100 grand. I'd like to buy, 20% of it. Here's 20 grand. What could have a guy like that been like, oh, wow, okay, I got 20 grand to go to, to invest in this channel, camera gear, conferences, etc. Well, what's that thing worth now? Right. Well, maybe other people, like latecomers or newer comers come to it and they're like, oh, wow, this brand is really building. Well, maybe I want to exit. And so I'm able to sell that coin, that NFT off, or I'm able to hold it for the longer term. So I mean, where we're going in the future, this is going to be really interesting.
It will be. It'll be interesting to see. But I think the bottom line is that you have to play the odds on it and have some pillars. You have to have precious metals. You have to have cryptocurrencies. You're going to have to own shares and assets that bring you an income. I think that's just the reality of where we're going. So other than that, Trav, I think we went on quite a bit longer than we had intended to. So let's wrap this up. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Nothing else. I mean, it was awesome being on your channel. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's always great to talk to you. Guys, if you have not already done so and you're still with us, jump down there to Trav's channel and go hit, put a link in the description. Go hit the subscribe button and make sure and like and share the video, and then obviously subscribe to this channel as well.
And comment below, because I'll be in those comments. I'll get back to them.
Yeah, I try to jump onto the ones that you post as well. So I answer just about every comment on my channel, as long as it's not a troll. I don't answer trolls. But,
yeah.
All right, y'all. Have a good night. Thanks, Trav. I appreciate you coming.